Oh yeah, I've got one viewer. Okay, g'day everybody. Mike Irving here from Advanced Business Abilities, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for the Hire Great People Who Stay webinar. I suppose I'm hoping that you've read the white paper I've written already. If you haven't, that's okay. We're going to be going into a bit of detail today. So look, my reality is that in business, irrespective of the size of your business or the industry that you're in, the biggest problem, one of the biggest, if not the biggest problems or challenges that is faced is the challenge of recruiting and finding people who are going to truly support your business. And we want to help with that. So probably the first question you might be asking is, well, who am I? And what's the reason that you want to listen to me about this subject? So let me cover that first. My previous career, I spent 10 years in the direct sales industry. And so that basically meant that we were recruiting people constantly, particularly salespeople and administrative support staff. So 10 years worth of experience, we conducted interviews every single day, and I learned loads about recruiting from that experience. The interesting thing is that I've actually learned a lot more about recruiting since then. So I thought I knew a lot. Well, yeah, now I know a lot more. The reason for that is that since that point, what I've been doing is working with businesses of a variety of sizes, including some not-for-profits, and helping them to recruit staff, helping them to find people that are going to be supportive of the mission of the business. One of the researchers in our team at Advanced Business Abilities spent 40 years researching that very subject and actually created a series of assessments that are used as a tool in a recruitment process. So if I thought I knew a lot more about it back then, well, yeah, what I know now, that actually pales in significance. So we're here today because we want to share some of our information. We're interested in helping to make this process easier for you and therefore helping your business to grow and expand. So our system consists of 7 steps. So I'm just going to swap over and we're going to do a screen share now. Hopefully this is all going to work the way we want it to. So 7 steps to hiring great people who stay. And what I'd like to do first of all is actually have a look at what are the 7 steps. So these steps, understand that they all have multiple steps within them. So this is very much an overview. The first step is really about target. And what we're talking about there is how to be totally clear on all of your targets and what targets are the most important ones. So you would have read in the special report that my opinion is the most important target is targets like who is it you're looking for, and what is it about that person that is going to help them be successful in the role. The target that's least important is when. Unfortunately, that's the one that most people focus on. So they have an urgency. So that's a bit about target. The second thing, target also, my apologies, target also includes your target in terms of creating a profile. So what does the person look like that you're hiring or that you'd like to hire? The second step is about attract, and that's really all about how you're going to reach the people that fit the profile that you're looking for. What are the best sources of new hires for your company? How can you reach those sources? What is available for you to reach out the same way that you do for marketing your products and your services? So that's step 2, which is attract. Step 3, for me, that's really important. It's about awareness. So if you read the special report, you would have seen that the biggest topic in that special report is actually about the topic of toxic people, or what we refer to as problem generators. Now, awareness, if you don't have an awareness of how to detect a problem generator, if you don't understand what indicators toxic people will display, then that means that you're at risk of hiring them. And if you hire one, that's going to cost you tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we've got loads of different examples that we can show you and share with you to help you to understand how that works. The next step, your 4th step, is review. And this again is an important step. It's one of the things that I find a lot of people don't really understand, is how to create an effective system for evaluating. And that goes not just for resumes. It's how to evaluate someone in an interview process. It's how to determine whether or not the person looks like the person that you want to hire before you hire them. Your 5th step's about meet, and that's really about when and how to meet your candidate, and more importantly, how to get to the truth with that candidate quickly. How can you determine whether or not that person's right for you? I'm actually helping a client recruit right now, and yesterday we conducted 3 interviews, and yeah, it was interesting because the people that I thought were going to interview the best didn't, and the people that my client thought were going to actually interview the worst, they weren't. So yeah, having a system for how to go about that process becomes very, very important when you pay attention to detail. The 6 steps about protect, and that's about learning how to predetermine attitude and integrity, as well as cultural fit, so that you protect your company and your business and your people from the problems that are created and from the costs associated with making a bad hire decision. And the last step's about retain. And again, that's a step that I've seen so many businesses get wrong. It's about why and how so many companies get it wrong and what to do about it, how to actually fix that. So the other thing that you would have seen on the back page of the report, we've got 4 crucial mindsets to ensuring success. So one's the best approach to creating a profile. Now, if we talk about that right now, the best approach for creating a profile is actually to make sure that you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's going to fill this role. What's important to them? How do they think? How do they actually approach their life and their work? So if you're a managing director, you're probably, you're what I would call an eagle. You're a doer. You want to get things done. If you're hiring somebody to be a bookkeeper or an accounts person in your company, they're not going to be that way. They're more attention to detail. So it's about making sure that you can sit in their shoes when you create the profile. The other crucial mindset, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is the danger of subjective language. And again, we'll go into detail with that in a little bit. The third one is why delegation is so misunderstood. Most people think that they've delegated when they've given someone else a job to do. And that's not actually the indicator of delegation. The indicator of delegation is when you give that job to someone, after you've given it to them, do you think about it? Do you consider whether or not they're doing it in a sufficient way? If you do think about it, it's an indicator that there's a problem and real delegation hasn't actually occurred. And the fourth one, which we'll go into a little bit later today as well, is the impact of understanding the fundamentals of cooperation. Good people don't stick around if you do not understand the fundamentals of cooperation. So we're going to go into a bit of detail about that one today. Okay, so for right now, what I'd like to do is I'm just going to ask you a question. I'm going to stick a poll out here, and I'd love if you just respond to this poll. So the question is, at what point is the recruitment process over? And I'm really interested in your response to this. There's 4 options. Just select the option that you think is the correct option. And we'll go through that a little bit later. We've got a few people on the call now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing your responses, and I'm looking forward to understanding your reality about this, because to me, this is a really important part of your recruitment process. Okay, so we'll go back to sharing this doc now. Okay, so we've covered the 4 crucial mindsets. The thing I want to talk about today, there's somebody out of the United States that I follow that I'm really in alignment with when it comes to the recruitment process. And his name is Mark Murphy. So Mark Murphy runs a company called Leadership IQ, and they've got a lot of great stuff. The thing that I like about him is that he's very factual, he's very statistical, he's very practical in his approach. His company does a lot of research, and one of the areas they've researched is they spent a few years, I think it was about 2 years, observing and following 20,000 new hires in businesses, following them to see what happened. Excuse me. And when they followed those people, what they found was astounding. The results showed that 49% of new hires failed within the first 18 months of starting their job. And what's crazier than that is that of those, 89% of them failed or left or were asked to leave due to a poor attitude of some sort. Now, that's astounding to me. It's also very much in line with my experience in coaching and consulting to businesses over the last 8 years myself, and helping them to hire, helping them to understand how to recruit great people. What I've found, Mike really spends a lot of time specifically looking at one type of attitude that he's deemed to be important. What I've found is that there's actually two. So the two different attitudes that are important in your recruitment process is A, the level of general attitude and integrity. And what I mean by that, this is where our researchers spent 40 years researching this and documenting it and creating a series of assessments that will actually test a candidate and tell you the way that they're going to behave, not in the first 3 months of employment, but 6 to 12 months down the track, after they're out of their probationary period, after they've stopped putting their best foot first because now they're full-time employed. So if we go into a little bit of detail there, general attitude and integrity it consists of 5 specific traits that our assessments measure. So those traits will tell us, based on the graphs that a person gets when they complete the assessments, those traits tell us about the general attitude and integrity, which consists of these traits. Number 1 is critical. So if you can think of all these traits in terms of, well, if a person has this trait, how's that going to affect their ability to work as a team member? If someone's critical, when they're in a team, they're going to be critical of the team. That's not going to help the team very much. The second trait is negative. So it's their tendency to look at the glasses half empty as opposed to half full. So again, if a person's negative in a team, well, they're certainly not going to lift the team up very much. Third trait's blame. So the level that somebody inappropriately blames or lays blame on something else or someone else or a situation for problems that they've created. The next trait's dishonesty, which is the specific definition there is the tendency of a person to, in a situation where if they tell the truth, they're going to lose something, it's their willingness to tell the truth. So high dishonesty means there's a low willingness to tell the truth. And the last trait's unsupportive. So that's about their willingness and tendency to do things for themselves rather than following the company's stated agenda. So to me, that's the first and most important attitude trait to measure, or attitude graph to measure, is general attitude and integrity. We do have tests for that. We use them religiously because we've found too many times that having a guess or using gut feeling doesn't work. So the second attitude, and this is where Mark Murphy's gone into a lot of detail, and I really like the systems that he uses, is about cultural attitude. So this is about whether or not the person, the candidate that you're interviewing, whether or not that person is going to fit within your culture. I've had it happen plenty of times where, for example, we've tested someone and the test came back and said that the person looked pretty good. And yet when that person was offered a role, culturally they didn't fit. Maybe their approach to work wasn't at the same level of the existing company. The existing company, maybe they have a culture where they work 50 or 60 hours a week and that's just the done thing. Whereas this other person who looked great initially, their approach was very different to that. It was much more important to them to work 40 hours a week and make sure that they had time for their friends on the weekend and to go out of an evening. So cultural attitude is important. And I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about that one today. So I've read a lot of Mark Murphy's stuff. I've bought his book. I'm going to give an overview of what he talks about because I think his system's brilliant. We've been using something similar for a while, and he's done a great job of laying it out. So let's look at that in a bit of detail. So in terms of cultural attitude, really, it's going to be different for every single company out there. So it's important that you document what makes the difference between a high and a low performer in your company. And I want to go through a simple way to do that right now. Mark wrote a blog post that, he does a fantastic job of describing it. He calls it his 3x3x3 exercise. And it basically goes like this. If you think of your 3 best and your 3 worst team members over the last 3 years, and as we go through this exercise, just consider those people, your 3 best and your 3 worst. So the process is pretty basic. The first thing is if you start with those, if we start with your 3 best people, what I'd like you to look at is just document what was it that these people did that exemplified the right attitude in your business. What were the behaviors that they demonstrated continuously, that when you observed those, you went, yeah, that's what we're all about. That's the right attitude. That's what really works and differentiates our business. So if you document that, the thing I want you to be really, really aware of is what I'll call subjective language. If you can see the second point here is you do the same thing for your 3 worst people over the last 3 years. What did they do that exemplified the wrong attitude in your business? Now, when I talk about subjective language, what I mean is this. As you're documenting these things, what we're looking for is called behavioral specificity. So we want to be able to document in a written format the right and the wrong attitudes, the indicators of top performers and the indicators of bottom performers in your business. If you find that you're documenting these things and you see words like professionalism, or you see highest levels of customer service that demonstrates professionalism, those words, they are not behaviorally specific. So they're completely subjective, and you are going to probably have a very different definition for those words than 5 of your colleagues. And if you do that, that's when you end up in trouble, because then you don't have a way of measuring whether or not a person actually fits that characterization. So a test that you can run if you want to ensure that you're being behaviorally specific is when you document the characteristic, the first thing to ask is, can a complete stranger understand and duplicate exactly what I'm saying here? A complete stranger. So demonstrates professionalism. Well, if you had that documented, a complete stranger might say, well, that means that they wear a 3-piece suit and a tie done in a double Windsor knot anytime they're dealing with a client. So if that's not your definition of demonstrating professionalism, and it probably isn't, you can see the reason that that's going to create a problem. The second question you can ask to test this is, can a complete stranger measure and observe the behavior based on what you've written? And if they can't do that, then it's not behaviorally specific enough. It's important that you do document all of these, because what we find is that when you go and conduct an interview, it's important that and we're going to come to this in a second, but it's important that we're able to actually determine, using questions that we've designed, whether or not this person's going to suit the role that you're looking to fill. Okay, so moving on. The next step, after we've made sure that we've been behaviorally specific in the characteristics, is we're then going to use those characteristics and allow yourself to come up with and think of what I'll refer to, or what Mark Murphy calls, differentiating situations. So what are the situations that you can think of that you can ask a question about that's going to elicit either the top performer indicators and behaviors or the bottom ones? So if your characteristic, or your top performer characteristic is, so if we're behaviorally specific, a person listens intently to what a customer is saying, and when a customer gets upset, they ensure that that customer is looked after, and they own the response and the response time to the customer to solve the problem, whereas a low performer would do the opposite of that. So a differentiating situation would be, well, a situation where a customer is going to get upset, or a customer's had a problem, a customer's had something that they're unhappy with about the service or product that you've delivered. So we create differentiating situations that are going to show us these indicators. In my opinion, when you're conducting an interview, and I agree, Mark agrees with this as well, the only questions that you want to ask during an interview are going to be questions that will differentiate between your top and bottom performers. Any other question you ask, it's just not, there's no point in asking it, because you're not going to be able to use the information that you get from it. It's nice to know a person's life story, and that's part of the process of getting to know them if you hire them. So now, when we go down and look at differentiating situations, and you create your questions that will bring up those characteristics, the next step really, oh, I've skipped a slide. The next step after that is going to be to create an answer key for your questions. So the answer key is going to show you whether or not the person has answered in a way that is a good indicator or not. Because it's all well and good having questions, but you want to be able to measure, and at the end of an interview, document how well that person's gone. And if they haven't gone well, then we're going to put them in the pile that says not for them, or they're not for us. Now, the next step in this, or for me, the point I want to raise right now is that when I'm recruiting, I've found that it's really easy to fall in love with a candidate. And that happens when you see a resume that looks brilliant, you meet the person and you conduct an interview and they're fantastic. The interview goes brilliantly. And I've had this happen too many times to ignore it. So you interview them and it goes brilliant and you're in love. You want to hire that person. One of the problems that exists in that situation is that often the people that we like are people that are similar to us. Now, from a recruiting point of view, that can create a problem, because often the people that we like, they're going to collude with us in some way in our area of weakness. So it's important that we stay objective. So when I go through a recruitment process, while I love using Mark's systems and we use that system consistently, the thing that I find to be important is prior to interviewing, I test people. And the reason for that is because it helps me to avoid falling in love with a candidate. The danger of falling in love with a candidate first is that if I do that and then I test them, it's really easy to ignore the test results. It's really easy to ignore what our assessments say about that person. And every time I've ignored it, I've paid the price every single time without fail. So the other reason is because the tests are less expensive than my time. And if you're in business, that's going to be certain, because time is your most valuable asset. There's nothing that you have that is going to be more expensive than your time. So, okay, so moving down, if you combine the assessments with a valuable set of interview questions based on your top performer characteristics, that's going to go a long way in ensuring that you invest in a profitable team member that you can delegate to. This probably, with the 7 steps and everything we've just talked about in just this one step, it probably sounds like a fair bit of work. And the reality is that it is. And here's the reason that it's important that you actually take your time and go through these processes bit by bit. And the reason that it's important is because of the problem that exists, which is that people lie. If you've not experienced that, that really tells me you might not have done a lot of recruiting. Some people lie, and they'll lie to get a job, they'll lie to get paid. And if you hire those people, it is going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars or more. For me, it comes down to a fundamental of cooperation. So if you look at what the detail is that consists or makes up cooperation, in order for it to actually occur, there's a requirement for these 3 things to be in place as an absolute minimum. The first thing is a shared brightness of future. And what I mean by that is if you're going to cooperate with someone, it's important that the thing you're working towards together is it's exactly the same for both of you. The shared brightness of future is to be in place. Now, if you are hiring someone and their general attitude and integrity is not what you want it to be, then that's going to mean that shared brightness of future is going to be difficult to have it in place. The second thing is frequency of interaction. And one of the things you're going to be doing if you hire someone, you're going to be spending a fair bit of time with them. And the concept is that you're going to interact with them. And when you do that, you're going to make sure that that brightness of future is in place. And the last thing that is a minimum requirement for cooperation is what I call provocability. Now, it's a bit of a funny word. Provocability is about your willingness to provoke and your willingness to be provoked. So if I tell a story to give an explanation of what that is, if you can imagine a business is having a problem with productivity, so they create a company-wide meeting in order to determine the best way for them to handle this fall in productivity. So everyone from the janitor to the CEO is at the meeting, and what they'll do is at that meeting, they're going to make a whole bunch of decisions around things they can do to increase productivity moving forward. So they make those decisions, the meeting ends. One of the decisions that they've made is that from now on, there'll be no smoking on work grounds. So anybody who smokes, they make a commitment to themselves that they're not going to have any cigarettes while they're at work or on work grounds. So 2 weeks later, the janitor goes out the back on a Friday afternoon, and he's there to put the bins out. So he walks out the back door and he sees the CEO standing out the back having a cigarette. Provocability is the willingness of the janitor to say to the CEO, hey, look, what happened here? I thought we made an agreement with ourselves that we weren't going to smoke on work grounds. How did you make it okay to break the agreement you've made with yourself? Provocability is also the willingness of the CEO to inspect what he's been asked and to turn around and apologize and go, look, you know what, you're right. And he's going to put the cigarette out and go back inside. So to have cooperation, provocability travels both, it travels in every direction within a team. It'll go up, it'll go down, and it'll also go sideways. So the detail that we've gone into today on the two types of attitudes that it's important that you measure and that you pay attention to in your recruitment process. The reason that those are important is because if they're not within the tolerance levels that are deemed appropriate, then you're not going to be able to have provocability, which means you're not going to have cooperation. So I'm just going to stop sharing now because I've realized that I've not been paying any attention to whether or not anyone is asking questions. So you got me back now. So let's just pop up my chat poll. No, we've got no questions. Okay, brilliant. So I'm just going to end that poll. So look, I really want to thank everybody for tuning in today. This has actually been our first ever webinar. So we're glad to have gotten this one sorted out and taken care of. We do offer a number of services that we can help you with your recruitment process. I choose not to do any selling on a webinar, so I'm just going to pop a pop in here. If you're interested in discussing how we can help you in your business, then please just pop your details in, click the link, it'll get you to pop your details in. We'll set a time to communicate with you one-on-one so that we can understand what it is that you'd like and we can help you determine what's going to be the best way for you to move forward. If anybody has any questions right now, please pop them in the chat box because I'm keen to help, I'm keen to support, I'm keen to make sure that you get value out of this webinar. And yeah, if there's any questions, let me know. If not, then I think we're pretty much done. So I'd love to hear any feedback. Please send hit reply in your inbox, send an email back to me. If you got any feedback for us to help us improve the way we've run this, or if there's more information you would like us to go into detail about, please let us know. Really happy to help in any way we can. We'll be running more webinars in the future, and we'll make sure that we keep you posted about what the content's going to be and how it's going to help you. So great. Thanks for your help. Thanks for your time today, guys. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll talk to you next time.